안녕하세요, 여러분. 안녕하세요. 제 말 들려요? So I just want to check a couple of things before I start the class. Can you guys hear me and can you guys see the PDF screen? If that's so, then we're all good to go. 안녕하세요. I see you guys coming in. Sabrina C, Mulan, Deja, Persian, Prince님, Citizen님, Leonti님, Susie님, 대자님 안녕하세요. Okay, so you guys can hear me. Angelina님, Chris님 안녕하세요. Atlas님, Elina님. Okay, so I think we're good to start since I think you guys can hear me and you guys can see the screen by your answer. Yes. So, okay, so we're just gonna jump right into it, guys. So to follow this lesson, I guess with as less confusion as possible, I recommend that you guys take the conjugation, the verbs present, past, and future tense conjugation lessons beforehand, and then move on to this class. So basically what we're learning today is how to use the negative verbs, how to make a negative verb and use it in a sentence. And actually it's not that difficult, guys. It's not that difficult, so we're just gonna move right into it. So how you make a positive verb into a negative verb is quite simple. So this 하다 verb is the first verb that we're gonna use to make it into a negative verb, guys. Negative verb. And you can simply put 안, guys. 안, and then use the base verb. 안 하다, 안 하다, 안 하다. So 안 하다 is 하다's negative verb, which means to not do, right? To not do. And actually, this is not the only way you can make a positive verb into a negative verb. What you can do is you can also put the stem of the verb, guys. The stem of the verb, in which case it's ha, right? In 하다's case, it's ha. And then you combine it with 지 않다, 지 않다. And this would also be the base form, that means to not do, to not do. 안 하다 or 하지 않다, they're both the negative form of 하다. So we're gonna try using them in a sentence, guys. So let's start from the positive verb. My son does homework. My son does homework. And to translate the sentence, guys, we have to know the exact word order, how the word order works in a Korean sentence. So we put the subject of the sentence first, and then the object, and then the verb, right? So to translate the sentence, we're gonna use my son first, which is 제 아들은, or 알리나님 맞아요. 우리 아들은 literally means our son, but when we are referring to our family members, we tend to use our more than my, but it still means my. It just adds more friendliness and more affection in the way you address your family member. So 우리 아들은 subject marker, right? 우리 아들은, and then you put the object next. 숙제 means homework. 우리 아들은 숙제를, and then you mark it with object marker. 우리 아들은 숙제를 does. Just like we learned, all verbs when used in a sentence has to be conjugated, right? So this to do verb, 하다 verb, has to be conjugated in a present tense, and that would be 숙제를 해요. 우리 아들은 숙제를 해요. And let's try making it into a sentence with opposite meaning. My son doesn't do the homework. Doesn't do the homework. So just like we learned here, you can simply put 안 right before a verb, guys. 안. So the first way you can translate the sentence would be 우리 아들은 숙제를 안 해요. 우리 아들은 숙제를 안 해요. Or you can use this verb, right? 하지 않다, which also means to not do. So you can say 우리 아들은 숙제를 And just like we learned, all verbs has to be conjugated, right? All verbs has to be conjugated, and 하지 않다 is not an exception. So 하지 않다 is also a base verb that has to be conjugated when used in a sentence. So you just don't say 하지 않다. You have to conjugate 않다, 않다, which would be 안 와요, 안 와요, since 안 has a vowel in its stem, right? A vowel in its stem, and it also has 받침, so you can put a. We learned this in our conjugation lesson, right? So 제 아들은 숙제를 안 해요, or 제 아들은 숙제를 하지 않아요 would be the correct way to translate this negative sentence. Doesn't do the homework. So far it's not difficult, right? It's not difficult. I hope you guys are following well. I can see from the comment that some of you guys are following quite well. 숙제를 하지 않아요. Okay, and let's move on to practice with more verbs. 좋아하다, 좋아하다. It's also one of the most commonly used verbs in Korean, right? 좋아하다, to like. And it works the same. You can just put 안, and then 좋아하다, 안 좋아하다. And this would mean to not like. To not like. And this is not the only negative form. You can also combine the stem 좋아하다, 하다, 좋아하, and then 지 않다, right? 좋아하지 않다, 안 좋아하다, and 좋아하지 않다. They're both the negative forms of 좋아하다. So if you guys ask me which one is more commonly used, guys, which one is more commonly used, I would have to say definitely 안. Just putting 안 before verb would be the more common way than 좋아하, than 지 않다 ending. But that doesn't mean 지 않다 is used like much less, or much. It is used commonly as well. It's just that, in my opinion, 안 would be like a more common one since it's more simple, right? But that doesn't mean 지 않다 is like rarely used. That's not the case. So when you're first starting out, what I recommend is that you get used to both forms. You practice with both forms and get used to both forms. That's what I recommend. So both are the negative forms of 좋아하다. And so let's try practicing with simple sentences too. Simple sentences. Two of these simple sentences. So if you want to say, I like spicy food, I like spicy food. Spicy food is 매운 음식, 매운 음식. It comes from the adjective 맵다, and 매운 is 맵다's modifier form, and you can learn about this in an adjective lesson in depth. But here we're going to go with 매운 음식 for spicy food. So you can say, 저는, and object of the sentence comes first, right? So 매운 음식을, you can say 좋아해요, right? 좋아하다 conjugated in present tense, 좋아해요. And if you want to write the sentence with the exact opposite meaning, I don't like, you can say 안 좋아해요. 안 좋아해요. Yes, you guys are getting it. 안 좋아해요. Or 그렇죠. 좋아하지, 좋아하 plus 지, and we have to conjugate 않다 in present tense, in which case it would be 좋아하지 않아요. So that's pretty simple, right? That's pretty simple. You guys are getting it. And yeah, we're gonna move on to the next verb. I think you guys can translate this right off. I don't eat meat, if you know the word meat in Korean, which is 고기. So I don't eat meat. Can you guys try translating this yourself? So 먹다's negative form would be either 안 먹다 or 먹지 않다. So you can use one of these two verbs. Whichever one you use doesn't matter. So 저는 고기를 먹지 않아요. 그렇죠. 저는 and 고기. I see some of you type 고기가, but it's 고기를 because it's object. It's the object of what you eat, right? So it should be marked with object marking particle. 저는 고기를 안 먹어요. Or if you want to use 지 않다, you can use 먹지 않아요. 먹지 않아요. 둘 다 맞아요. So far we only practice with present tense, right? We practice how to say don't eat, like I don't eat, he doesn't do this, someone doesn't do this. And now let's move on to past tense, guys. Past tense. Past tense. So if you know how to conjugate verbs in past tense, this wouldn't be really difficult. You guys can do it pretty well. So I didn't read that book yet. So for yet, guys, yet, we can use 아직. 아직. 아직 is an adverb that means still or yet. And when 아직 is followed by a positive verb, it means still. And when 아직 is followed by a negative verb, it means yet. So we're going to use 아직, and then it's going to be followed by a negative verb. So 읽다's negative verb, guys. 읽다's negative verb would be 안 읽다, right? 안 읽다. 안 읽다. Or 읽지 않다, right? This one you can figure out quite easily since we learned how it works, how the negation works. But if you want to conjugate it in past tense, you can say, so let's try translating the whole sentence. 저는 that book, 그 책, and mark it with object marker, 그 책을, and you can put, so where you place the adverb might be is also a very commonly asked questions, one of the commonly asked questions, and adverbs in Korean are placed in the front part of the sentence as much as possible, but it's not like there's a fixed place, like a fixed spot it has to be put. If it's placed before a verb, that's considered fine. But normally it's put at the front part as much as possible. So you can put 아직 here, or you can put 아직 here. It really doesn't matter. So 저는 아직 그 책을, or 저는 그 책을 아직 and didn't read would be, you conjugate 안 읽다 in past tense. 안 읽었어요. 안 읽었어요. So this would be one way to say it. 저는 아직 그 책을 안 읽었어요. Or if you want to use 읽지 않다, you have to conjugate 않다 as you guessed it, right? You have to conjugate 않다 in past tense, in which case it would be 안 왔다. So let's write it here. I need more space. 잠깐만요. Let's write it here. 저는 그 책을 읽지 않았어요. And this is pronounced 않았어요. And this is pronounced 읽었어요. So 저는 그 책을 안 읽었어요. Or 저는 그 책을 읽지 않았어요. Both would be the translation of I didn't read that book yet. How about Mom didn't answer my call yesterday. So this is also past tense, negative form, right? And to answer one's call, guys, we say to receive a call. So you can just say 전화를 받다. 전화를 받다 for answer my call. 전화를 받다. So to translate this sentence, we would first have to figure out what the negative form of 받다 would be, right? Which would be 안 받다, or stem plus 지 않다, right? So we're gonna use both verbs. So 엄마는, or 어제, let's try putting the adverb, time adverb at the very front part. So 어제 엄마가 어제 엄마가 or 엄마는. So whether you use 가 or 는 doesn't really matter here because there is no context, guys, right? It's just an example sentence. It's just one sentence without any context. So whether you use 가 or 는 here doesn't really matter, guys, because distinguishing whether you use when to use 이가 or 은는 is all about context, right? Context. So here it doesn't really matter. So you guys don't have to care about it that much here. So 어제 엄마가 전화를 안 받다. Conjugated in past tense. 안 받았어요, right? 안 받았어요. 엄마가 어제 전화를 안 받았어요. Or if you use 받지 않다, it would be 받지 않았어요. You conjugate 않다 in past tense. 받지 않았어요. So that would be the correct two ways to translate Mom didn't answer my call yesterday. And it also works with future tense, guys. Future tense. Future tense. I won't buy this book. It's too expensive. It's too expensive would be 너무 비싸요. 너무 비싸요. And we're going to translate only this part. I won't buy this book. I won't buy this book. So to translate this sentence, there is a negative form used, so we have to know the negative form of 사다, which is easily figure outable now, right? 안 사다, or I'm just gonna write it small because I think you guys can already figure it out for yourself. So 안 사다 or 사지 않다, right? 안 사다 or 사지 않다. And if you want to conjugate it in future tense, you simply conjugate these two verbs in future tense. So 저는 이 책을, this book, 이 책을 안 and 사다's future tense 안 살 거예요. Or 안 살 거야 if you're using 반말, but we're gonna go with 존댓말. We're gonna stick to 존댓말 in this class. So 이 책을 안 살 거예요. Or if you want to use 사지 않다 verb, it would be 이 책을 사지 안, and you have to conjugate 않다 in future tense, right? 않다 in future tense, which would be 을 거예요, right? 않을 거예요. Since future conjugation follows stem plus 리을 받침 or 을 거예요, and if the verb's stem has 받침, it's followed by 을, right? And since 않다 is the stem of 않다, and this 안 has 받침, so it has to be followed by 을. So 저는 이 책을 사지 않을 거예요. 사지 않을 거예요. It's pronounced 않을 거예요. 않을 거예요. 않을 거예요. 이 책을 안 살 거예요. 이 책을 사지 않을 거예요. Okay, so far we've practiced with verbs. But the same negation rule applies to adjectives as well. It works just the same for adjectives as well. So if you want to negate 바쁘다, which is an adjective that means to be busy, it follows the same rule. 안 바쁘다, you just put 안 before a verb, or you put the stem and then 지 않다. So these two would be the negative adjective of 바쁘다, right? So if you want to translate I'm not busy these days, so for these days you can say 요즘 or 요새. 요즘 or 요새. 저는 요즘 or 요새 안 바빠요. 안 바빠요. You conjugate 바쁘다 in present tense or 바쁘지 않아요 바쁘지 않다 in present tense, which would become 바쁘지 않아요. 저는 요즘 or 요새 안 바빠요 or 바쁘지 않아요 would be the correct translation of I'm not busy these days. I'm not busy these days. And moving on to the next adjective, 달다, which means to be sweet. So to translate, this cake isn't that sweet. So we're going to first start with this cake isn't sweet. And then we're going to learn how to say something isn't that adjective. So this cake, you can say cake. 이 케이크, or you can also say cake. 이 케이크 안 달아요. 안 달아요. You can conjugate 달다 in present tense and put 안, or you can also conjugate 달지 않다 in present tense, which would become 달지 않아요. 이 케이크 안 달아요, or 이 케이크 달지 않아요. So this would mean this cake isn't sweet, right? But if you want to add, this cake isn't that sweet, which means that it contains certain elements of sweetness, but it's not entirely sweet, right? In that case, you can use this adverb. 이 케이크 별로 plus negative verb means it's not that adjective or negative adjective. It's not that adjective. So you can say 이 케이크 별로 안 달아요. Sorry. 이 케이크 잠깐만요. Let me drink some water. Sorry about that. 별로 안 달아요. Or there's another adjective you can use, which is 그렇게. 별로 안 달아요. Or 그렇게 안 달아요. Or 그렇게 달지 않아요. Would mean this cake isn't that sweet. So by putting the adverb 별로 or 그렇게 and combining with negative adjective, it has the meaning of it's not that adjective. 그 다음에 okay, so this is the most basic rule of how to form a negative verb in Korean. And it would be really, really awesome if it ends there. It would be just happy, just everybody will be happy with it. But that is not the case, sadly. There are some exceptions. There are some exceptions that work differently, but not like too far off. It's not too far off from the regular rule that we just learned. It's slightly different, and we're gonna learn which rule is that and what kinds of verbs the rule applies to. So, okay, so the verbs, when it comes to verbs whose verbs that consist of the combination of noun plus 하다, so verbs that's basically a combination of noun plus 하다, are negated slightly differently. So let me give you an example of noun plus 하다 combination. So there are many 하다 ending verbs, guys, 하다 ending verbs, and not all of them, but many of them are the combination of noun and 하다. So in case of 공부하다, 공부 means study. It's a noun that means study. And when it's combined with 하다 verb, so we learned that 하다 itself means to do, right? To do. So if 공부하다 literally it would mean to do a study. And if it's combined, you get the full verb. It's a verb in its entirety that means to study. So 공부하다 is a combination of noun and 하다. It's one of the examples of the combination of noun and 하다. And same with 운동하다. 운동 is a noun that means exercise or workout. And 운동하다 would literally mean to do exercise, and when they're combined, they become a full verb that means to exercise or to work out. 운동하다. And 요리하다 as well. 요리 means to cook. Sorry. 요리 means cooking. It's a noun that means cooking. And if you combine it with 하다, it means to do cooking. And when combine them together, you get to cook. The full verb that means to cook. So we're gonna learn how to negate these types of verbs. So if you follow the rule that we learned so far, if you follow the regular negation rule, it would be 안 공부하다, right? 안 공부하다. However, this is a wrong way to negate 공부하다 verb. Let me drink more tea. This would be a wrong way to do it. Actually, you have to, when you're gonna negate it, you're gonna first have to separate the noun and the verb 하다. You're gonna have to first separate, and what we're gonna negate is not the noun, but the verb. So we have to put 안 before 하다. Not before 공부, but before 하다. So 공부하다's negation would be 공부 안 하다. 공부 안 하다, not 안 공부하다. Or you can also put the object marker here. 공부를 안 하다, which would mean to not do a study. So you're making 공부 in an object. So this is possible, but object marker is also omittable. You can also omit it. So it's either 공부 안 하다 or 공부를 안 하다. This is one way to negate it. But if you want to use 지 않다 form, guys, 지 않다 form, that's quite easy because the same rule applies when it comes to combining it with 지 않다. You just combine the stem. So 공부하 stem would be 공부하다 stem would be 공부하, right? Because this is a full verb. 공부하, the verb plus 지 않다. Stem plus 지 않다. This rule still works. This rule is still valid. But when you're combining it with 안, you have to separate the noun and the verb. But not the case of 지 않다. You can just put the stem, 공부하, and then 지 않다. So 공부하다's negative form would be 공부 안 하다 and 공부하지 않다. 다음에 how about 운동하다. Can you guys try negating it using 안 first and then 지 않다? So can you guys try negating 운동하다 by using 안? So like we learned, we have to separate the noun and 하다, right? We have to separate the noun and 하다 and then negate 안. And then negate 하다, right? So it's not 안 운동하다, it would be 운동 안 하다. And you can also, if you like, you can also put object marker after the noun. 운동을 안 하다 or 운동 안 하다. 맞아요. How about combining it with 지 않다, which is quite simple. It would be stem 운동하 and then 지 않다. So these two would be the base form of negative verb of 운동하다, right? 운동하다, 운동 안 하다, 운동하지 않다. And last one, 요리하다. How about 요리하다? 요리하다's negative verb. 요리하다. You first separate it and you negate 하다, or it's optional, but you can also put the object marker. 요리를 안 하다, right? 요리를 안 하다 or 요리 안 하다. And if you want to combine it with 지 않다, it would be stem 요리하 and then 지 않다, 요리하지 않다. These two would be the negative form of 요리하다. Okay. Very good, guys. So before I move on to 말 안 하다, actually, let's move straight into 말하다. So 말하다, guys, there's a reason why I put it separately here. So this is also a combination of 말 plus 하다. So 말 is a noun, guys. 말 is a noun that means spoken words. Spoken words. It could be speech, or anything that you said or say, so it means spoken words. So 말하다 literally means to do spoken words, so it means to speak, to say, or to tell, all those verbal meanings. And since it's a combination of noun plus 하다, it also follows that rule that we just learned, separating noun and 하다, and then negate it like this, 말 안 하다. So 말 안 하다 would be the correct way to negate it, but 말하다 is one of the few 하다 ending verbs, one of the very few noun plus 하다 combination word that can also work like this. 안 말하다. 안 말하다. So for 말하다, guys, for 말하다, it follows both rules. 말 안 하다 or 안 plus verb. For 말하다, both works. Both are commonly used, guys. Both are commonly used. So this is one of the very, very few examples. So most 하다 combination, guys, most noun plus 하다 combination follow this rule. You separate the noun and 하다 rule. But 말하다 is a very rare exception, guys. So just in case you guys come across like 안 말하다 someday and you go like, oh, this is not like what I learned, you might get confused, right? So I'm mentioning this just in case you get confused in the future, but this is the rare exception, guys. This is the rare exceptions. So, okay, so based on the verbs that we learned just now, we're gonna practice making sentences, these four sentences, and move to the next part. So we're gonna do it quick, guys, and let's do it quick since it wouldn't be too difficult if you remember the rule. So I don't cook would be 저는 요리하다. You have to negate 요리하다, right? So it's not 안 요리하다. You have to separate noun and 하다. So 저는 요리 안 해요. Like I don't cook. I'm too lazy to cook. 저 요리 안 해요. 저는 요리 안 해요. 전 요리 안 해요. Or 저는 sorry. 저는 요리하지 않아요. 저는 요리하지 않아요. 저는 요리하지 않아요. How about I didn't work out yesterday? So we're gonna put adverb first. 어제 workout is 운동하다. And if you wanna negate it by using 안, we have to separate 운동, the noun, and 하다, right? So 어제 운동을 안 didn't, so it's past tense. 안 했어요. We have to conjugate it in past tense. 어제 운동을 or 운동, we learned that object marker here is optional. So 어제 운동 안 했어요. 어제 운동 안 했어요. Or if you want to use 지 않다 verb, it would be 운동하지 않았어요. Right? 운동하지 않았어요. 저는 어제 운동을 안 했어요. Or 운동하지 않았어요. How about I will not study today? I will not study today. If you want to translate this negative sentence by using 안, 오늘, let's first use 오늘, today, 오늘 공부 안 하다, right? Not 안 공부하다, 공부 안 하다. And then you have to conjugate this in future tense. So, 오늘 공부 안 할 거예요. 오늘 공부 안 할 거예요. 오늘 공부 안 할 거예요. Or if you want to use 지 않다 verb, it would be 공부하지 않다. You have to conjugate this in future tense. 하지 않을 거예요. Okay? 공부하지 않을 거예요. 그 다음에 I won't tell mom. I won't tell mom. So for this tell verb, we can use 말하다 verb that we just learned, right? 말하다 verb. And there's one thing to note about this 말하다 verb, guys. So in English, you guys can write the person that you're telling it to right after the verb, right? So which makes mom an object of tell, right? Tell mom. But in Korean, it doesn't work that way. So when we say to tell someone, we don't make someone an object. We don't make someone an object and go like someone을 말하다. We don't say it like this. We always say to tell to someone. So the particle that corresponds to in English would be either 한테 or 에게. They both mean the same thing. It would mean to. So someone 한테 or 에게 말하다. We always say it like this. We always use this particle when we say to tell someone. Tell to someone literally, right? So it would be 엄마한테, to tell mom, 엄마한테 말하다, and not 엄마를 말하다, right? So it would be 엄마한테. 잠깐만요, let me raise a few things to make more space. So 엄마한테, and we have to negate the verb 말하다, right? 엄마한테, we can say 안 말할 거예요, right? 안 말하다, and you conjugate it in future tense. 안 말할 거예요, because we learned that 말하다 is that kind of exception verb where both 말 안 하다, the verb separation, verb and noun separation, and just a regular rule, 안 plus verb works. Both of them works, right? So you can either say 엄마한테 안 말할 거예요, 엄마한테 안 말할 거예요, or you can also negate it by separating the noun and the verb and say 말 안 하다, 말 안 할 거예요. 엄마한테 안 말할 거예요, or 엄마한테 말 안 할 거예요. Or if you want to use 지 않다 form, you can say 말하지 않다. This you can conjugate it in the future tense, in which case it would be 안 할 거예요. 엄마한테 말하지 않을 거예요. So these are three possible ways you can translate I won't tell mom in Korean. Okay, and moving on to so there's one thing to note about 좋아하다 verb, guys. So 좋아하다 verb looks like, so 좋아하다 also ends in 하다, right? So it looks like maybe it's a combination of 좋아 and 하다, but that is not the case, guys. 좋아 is not a combination of noun plus 하다 because 좋아 is not a noun, guys. 좋아 is not a noun. 좋아하다 is just its own verb. That doesn't stem from anything. It's just a verb on its own. Maybe to go more in depth, it would be a combination of 좋다 plus 하다, but this is not really an important grammar point to discuss, and you can just remember that 좋아하다 is not a combination of noun plus 하다. So you cannot negate it like 좋아 안 하다. It doesn't work like this. You can just say 안 좋아하다. 안 좋아하다, because it's not a combination of noun plus 하다. You don't have to separate 좋아 and 하다. But when you watch some dramas, you will sometimes, it's not common, but you will sometimes hear 좋아 안 해. You'll sometimes hear some people say like this, but that's grammatically correct. That's grammatically incorrect, guys. You can say it kind of, you know, if you want to be unconventional, and maybe you want to sound playful, you can definitely change it up to 좋아 안 해. But normally, grammatically speaking, this is not correct, guys. This is not correct. So 안 좋아하다 would be the correct negation form of 좋아하다. Okay, and now we're gonna move on to the next one. So it would be really, really great if it ends there, but there is also a different set of adjectives that work differently. But I promise it's not that confusing, guys, so please don't be intimidated. If you get used to it, it's just it's something that'll come natural to you. So we just learned that when it's a verb that is a combination of noun plus 하다, we have to separate noun and 하다 when negating, right? But when we're talking about adjectives, not verbs, adjectives that are the combination of noun plus 하다, and you're trying to negate it, it works differently from verbs, from their verb equivalent. So let's look at the example adjectives that are the combination of noun plus 하다. So 건강하다. 건강 means health, guys. So this is a noun, and 하다 is a verb that means to do, and combine them together, it becomes an adjective, guys, that means to be healthy. Not a verb, an adjective. 건강하다 is an adjective that means to be healthy. 행복 means happiness. happiness. So literally, to do happiness and combine them together, it becomes an adjective that means to be happy. 똑똑하다 is not necessarily a combination of noun plus 하다 because 똑똑 is not a noun. 똑똑 is not a noun, but I brought this so that just to show you that it applies to all 하다 ending adjectives. 하다 ending adjectives, when you want to negate them, cannot be separated. Cannot be separated, and it just follows the regular negation rule that we learned, which is putting an before an adjective. So to be not healthy would be 안 건강하다, and it wouldn't be 건강 안 하다. 건강 안 하다. It would be 안 건강하다. And to not be happy would be just 안 행복하다. And it wouldn't be 행복 안 하다. It wouldn't work that way because this is not a verb. This is an adjective, guys. When it's adjective, you cannot separate a noun and a verb when you're negating it. So it would be 안 건강하다, 안 행복하다. And 똑똑하다, to not be smart. To not be smart would be 안 똑똑하다 and not 똑똑 안 하다. So this is the rule that you should note, guys. When 하다 combination, noun plus 하다 combination is an adjective, when you're negating it, you cannot separate it like you did in verbs equivalent. So that's one rule that you guys should take note of. So if you want to translate this sentence, I am not healthy, you wouldn't say 저는 건강 안 해요. You would say 저는 안 건강해요. 안 건강해요. Or I forgot to mention, guys. When it's 지 않다. So one good thing about 지 않다, or good thing about 지 않다, is that it's always consistent, right? 지 않다 is always consistent. There's no exception. You just can't combine the stem and 지 않다, and this would make it in a proper negation form. So it's either 안 건강하다 or 건강하지 않다. And 행복하다, negation would also be 행복하지 않다. 똑똑하다 or 안 똑똑하다 or 똑똑하지 않다. So what I really like about 지 않다 is that it's always so consistent. So that's really good. Consistency is really an admirable value. So 똑똑하지 않다. So if you want to say I am not healthy, you can either use 저는 안 건강해요 or 저는 건강하지 않아요, right? 건강하지 않아요. How about 건강하지 않아요. 저는 안 건강해요. 저는 건강하지 않아요. How about I'm not that smart. So do you guys remember how to say that plus adjective that we learned just earlier in this class? We can use two adverbs, either 별로 plus adjective or 그렇게 plus adjective, right? 별로, 그렇게 adjective. So if you want to say I'm not that smart, I'm not that smart. Oh, and they have to be followed by negative adjective, right? Negative adjective. 나는 or 저는 let's stick to 반말. Let's stick to 존댓말. 저는 별로 안 똑똑해요. 그렇죠, 맞아요. 저는 별로 안 똑똑해요. 저는 별로 안 똑똑해요. Or you can also go with 지 않다. 저는 별로 똑똑하지 않아요. 똑똑하지 않아요. 맞아요, 여러분. 그리고 you can also change 별로 to 그렇게. 저는 그렇게 안 똑똑해요. 저는 그렇게 똑똑하지 않아요. I'm not that smart. So that's how you can say it. Okay. Okay. So far we learned quite a lot of rules regarding negation of verbs and adjectives. But that's not the end, guys. That's not the end. So there are verbs that has separate negation words. that has separate negation words, which means it doesn't really work by following the regular rule, which is putting an plus verb, right? And one most common example of those kinds of verbs is 있다, 있다. 있다 has various meanings, and it's used in various like expressions and also grammar phrases, and we're gonna go into that. But let's first learn what 있다, what basic meanings 있다 has. So 있다 is always followed by 이가, the subject marker, and never 을. This you have to remember, guys. Because this is a very common mistakes that I see from many, even learners who reach a certain like higher level than a beginner level. They still make this mistake of using 을을 with 있다. But always remember that 있다 can never be used with object marker. It's always used with subject marker, even if that noun that 있다 follows it works as an object in a sentence. So here's what I mean, guys. noun+이가 있다. If you say noun+이가 있다, its first meaning is for noun to be there, to be somewhere. Like, oh, there is a girl, there is a coffee. That kind of is. 있다 means that. So for there to be noun. So noun, so it means noun kind of exists somewhere, like noun kind of is there. So this noun is basically a subject, which makes sense, guys, right? Because for something to exist, that something is a subject in a sentence, right? The subject of exist. But it further extends to the meaning of to have a noun. To have a noun. And in English, when you say to have something, that noun, that something that you have, is considered an object in a sentence. So due to this, many people tend to use noun+을 있다 when they mean to have a noun. But this is grammatically wrong, guys. 있다 is always followed by 이가, even if you mean to have that something. So, for example, if you want to say, I have socks. Socks is 양말. You can say 양말이 있어요. And not 양말을 있어요. 양말이 있어요 would be correct. And actually 양말이 있어요 would have two meanings, which would be there is a pair of socks, or I have a socks, right? I have socks. I have a pair of socks. And if you want to say there is coffee, you can say 커피가 있어요. Right? So it's always followed by the object marker. And when you want to negate 있다, and say there isn't or I don't have, we don't say 안 있다. 안 있다 is a kind of verb that does not exist. 안 있다는 you don't say it. We don't say it like this. Instead, 있다's negative form is 없다. Always. It's not 안 있다, it would be 없다, guys. So 없다 would mean to not be there or to not have. So if you want to say I don't have socks, you wouldn't say 양말이 안 있어요. 양말이 안 있어요 would be a wrong way to say it. Instead, you can change the verb 있어요 to 없어요. 양말이 없어요, which means I don't have socks. And if you want to say there is no coffee, instead of saying 커피가 안 있어요, which would be grammatically wrong and it would sound weird. Rather than 커피가 안 있어요, we would instead say 커피가 없어요. And this applies to many other expressions that have 있다 in it, like 뭐뭐 할 수 있다. We're going to learn this in a separate lesson, but verb 리을 받침으로 을 수 있다 means to be able to do something, to can do something. And if you want to negate it, it would be verb 수 없다. Verb 수 없다, guys. This we're gonna learn in a separate class, guys, including 못 plus verb. This we're gonna learn in a separate class. But if you want to say like I can do it. Oh, 잠깐만요. There's one image that I brought for encouragement and also to show this as an example of 수 있어. Can you guys see the image on the screen? I just put it on. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. Oh, there you go. 여러분, 그 사진 보여요? Can you guys see the photo with like handwriting on it? So, 화이팅! 넌 할 수 있어. 화이팅! 넌 할 수 있어. It means like fighting. Fighting is kind of like a word of encouragement. 넌 할 수 있어. 할 수 있어. It's 하다 plus 리을 받침 수 is a combination, which means you can do. You can do. And if you want to negate it, if you want to negate 넌 할 수 있어, it would be 넌 할 수 없어, right? 넌 할 수 없어. You can't do it. So 넌 할 수 있어. You can't do it. 여러분 모두 할 수 있어요. 여러분 모두 할 수 있어요. 너무 조금 어려워도 계속 힘내요. 계속 let's keep it up, guys. Let's keep it up. Okay, so back to our lesson. Just once again, we're gonna learn this in a separate lesson more in depth. And let's move on to some of the adjectives, basic adjectives that have 있다 in it. So 맛있다. It's actually kind of like an abbreviation of 맛이 있다. So 맛 is a noun that means taste. So 맛있다 literally means to have a taste or for a taste to be there. So it means to be tasty, to be delicious. And if you want to say something is not delicious, rather than saying 안 맛있다, it would sound much more natural to say 맛없다. And because of some pronunciation rule, this is pronounced 맛없다. You can check the consonant assimilation video for the pronunciation rule. But 맛없다 is not pronounced 맛없다. It's pronounced 맛없다 with two sound in between. 맛없다, to be not delicious. And 재미있다. 재미 is a noun that means fun. So this is kind of an abbreviation of 재미가 있다, for a fun to be there or to have fun. So if you want to say something is not fun, something's not interesting, something's boring, you can say 재미없다. But guys, do you remember the consistency I mentioned about 지 않다? For 맛있다, guys, if you want to negate it, although 안 맛있다 would not work, 안 맛있다 would grammatically not work, 맛있지 않다 does work. 맛있지 않다 does work. And so it is with 재미있지 않다. But of course, saying 맛없다 and 재미없다 is more common, guys, rather than putting 지 않다 after 있다 ending verb or adjective. So you can remember that 있다's negative form is 없다, and this is more common than 지 않다. Okay. 그 다음에요. Let's move on to verb-고 있다. I am not sure. So I'm not sure which level, like which part of Korean grammar knowledge that you have and that you don't have. But verb-고 있다. I have a separate video on it that I cover, where I cover more in depth about this grammar, so you can check that out. But to briefly mention what 고 있다 grammar is here, it's basically making a verb into a present progressive. Like I am doing this rather than I do this, or she is watching TV. These kinds of form is called present progressive, and by putting 고 있다 after verb stem, you make the verb into present progressive. But when you want to negate present progressive, it does not work like this. It does not work. 고 없다. This does not exist, guys. This does not exist. Verb 고 없다 does not exist, and there's like a different way where you can negate 고 있다, the present progressive form, which we're gonna learn right now. So dad isn't watching TV right now. Dad isn't watching TV right now. So let's first try translating the positive sentence first to make it easier. So dad, 아빠가 right now 지금 watching TV. So we're gonna write the object first and then the verb last, right? So 아빠가 지금, you can just use TV를 we also just say TV를. Let's stick with the Korean, although this stems from English word. 아빠가 지금 TV를, and then if you want to say is watching, you can combine the verb stem. To watch is 보다, guys. 보다. So you combine the verb stem, with 고 있다. 보고 있다. And since 보고 있다 is a base form, guys, right? It has to be conjugated when used in a sentence. So it would be 보고 있어요. 아빠가 지금 TV를 보고 있어요 would be a translation of dad is watching TV right now. But if you want to negate it, dad isn't watching TV right now. He's doing something else. Just like we learned, it's not 보고 없어요, right? When it comes to negating present progressive, it does not work this way. So the most simplest way you can negate it would be using the consistent 지 않다, right? So 보고 있다 is the stem, and then you combine it with 지 않다 and conjugate this 않다 to 지 않아요. So you can say like this. 아빠가 지금 TV를 보고 있지 않아요. You can say like this. Or 아빠가 지금 TV를, you can negate the verb in the stem part first. The stem part first, you put the negative verb in 고 있다. So 안 보고 있어요. 안 보고 있어요. 아빠가 지금 TV를 보고 있지 않아요. It would be either this or 아빠가 지금 TV를 안 보다. You first put the negative verb in the stem part first and then combine it with 고 있다. So these two are the possible ways of negating a present progressive sentence. 안 보고 있어요. 안 보고 있어요. You first put the base verb of negation at the start. 안 보고 있어요. 안 보고 있어요. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next sentence. We're gonna try negating the present progressive. Actually, before we move on to this sentence, let's first practice with this one because this is a lot easier. Because this becomes a little more complicated. There's like a more thought you have to process because this one is 요리하다, which is the combination of noun plus 하다. So there's more to think about. It's not a rocket science, but still it's more complicated than translating this sentence. So we're gonna practice with this sentence first. So to sleep is 자다. And by using this verb, can you guys try translating the cat isn't sleeping? So if you want to say the cat is sleeping, 고양이가 자고 있어요, right? That's pretty simple. You just can combine the stem with 고 있어요. But if you want to negate it, it's not 고 없어요, right? It's not 고 없어요. Instead, the first way to negate it would be 자고 있지 않아요, right? 자고 있지 않아요. Or you can put 안 in the stem part first, right? In the stem part first, and then conjugate this in present progressive, which is 고양이가 안 자고 있어요. 안 자고 있어요. 고양이가 자고 있지 않아요. Or 고양이가 안 자고 있어요. These two would be the possible translation for the cat isn't sleeping. And the last sentence would be mom isn't cooking. Mom isn't cooking. So to cook is 요리하다. And there are like double things, like double the things. You have to kind of double your thinking to translate this because to cook is 요리 plus 하다, noun plus 하다. So they have to be separated, right? So 엄마는 the easiest way would be 엄마는 요리하고 있지 않아요, right? 요리하고 있다, you simply negate this one. 있지 않아요. So this would be a simple one. But if you want to put 안 in the stem part, if you want to put 안 in the stem part and negate it there instead of negating at the last part, you can. It's not 안 요리하고 있어요, right? It's not 안 요리하고 있어요. It's not 안 요리하고 있어요. It should be, that's right guys, that's right. I see a couple of correct answers in the comment section, in the chat section. This should be separated, right? 요리 안 하 and then 고 있어요. So 엄마는 요리 안 하고 있어요 would be the correct way to translate this and not 안 요리하다. Because just like we learned, 요리하다 is a verb that is a combination of noun plus 하다 verb. And when you want to negate such verbs, you have to first separate the noun and 하다. So you have to put 안 between 요리 and 하다, right? So 엄마는 요리 안 하고 있어요. My mom isn't cooking. My mom isn't cooking. Right. So that's how you can negate 고 있다. 고 있다. 이게 좀 은근히 헷갈려요. A lot of learners find it confusing. A lot of learners find it confusing. So it requires some practice to get used to it, of course. Of course. 그 다음에 let's move on to 고 싶다. So negating 고 싶다 would feel just as confusing as negating 고 있다. And this is also one of the things that a lot of learners find confusing and still have a hard time getting used to. But like I said, with like much practice, it's definitely something that's not a rocket science. It will come naturally to you at some point. So 고 싶다 means to want to verb. To want to verb. And if you want to say to not want to verb, how should you do it? To not want to verb. So the easiest, simplest way would be using that consistent 지 않다, right? 지 않다. 지 않다. 지 않다. And the next one, the next one would also be 안. Actually, it works the same way as 고 있다. You just put 안 in the stem part instead of negating the last verb. Instead of negating the last part. So, 안 verb 고 싶다. There are two ways to negate this. First one is verb 고 싶지 않다, or just you straight up negate the stem part first, 안, and then 고 싶다. So these are two ways. So this practically works the same as 고 있다's negation, right? 고 있다's negation. So I don't want to wake up early would be 저는 일찍 일어나고 싶지 않아요. 쉽지 않아요. Sorry, I'm going a little too fast. This is for like low to mid beginner level learners, and I think I'm going a little too fast, so I'll just slow it down. So wake up is 일어나다, guys. 일어나다. And early is 일찍. 일찍. Oh, so early is an adverb, so you can put it at the front part as much as possible, right? And you can combine 일어나다 verb with 고 싶다. So 저는 일찍 일어나고 싶다 would mean I want to wake up early, and you negate it with 지 않아요, which case it would be I don't want to. I don't want to. And next one. 저는 일찍 안 일어나고 싶어요. 안 일어나고 싶어요. You can put 안 in front of, in the stem part, right? 안 일어나고 싶어요. Okay, that's how you can negate I don't want to wake up early. 저는 일찍 안 일어나고 싶어요. Okay, let me erase this so that I can afford more space. The next one is I don't want to think. I don't want to think. So think is also one of those noun plus 하다 combination verb, guys. 생각하다. And you know what to do, right? I don't have to mention it once again. You know what to do when you come across these kinds of verbs and you're trying to negate it. So I'm gonna leave it up to you guys to do it by yourself. I don't want to think. So the easiest way would be 생각하고 싶다, and you negate this. 생각하고 싶지 않아요. 생각하고 싶지 않아요. And the second one, if you want to place 안 in the stem part, you can say 안 생각하고 싶어요. 여러분 이거 맞나요? 안 생각하고 싶어요 맞나요? 안 생각하고 싶어요. If you say it like this, people will understand it, but it would still sound a little bit awkward. So the correct way would be separating 생각 and 하다 and say, 생각 안 하고 싶어요. 생각 안 하고 싶어요. I don't want to think. 생각 안 하고 싶어요. 생각하고 싶지 않아요. I don't want to think about it, or I don't want to think. It's like thought itself. I just want to rest. I don't want to think. 생각하고 싶지 않아요. Okay, so that's how you can negate 고 있다 and 고 싶다. 고 있다, 고 싶다. And I feel like we kind of sidetracked a bit, but it's actually not, because we were in the middle of 있다, negating 있다 verb, and then we move on to some relevant expressions and how to negate them and how to negate them differently. And another example of the verb that has separate negation, separate negation word is 알다, guys. 알다. 알다는 to know란 뜻이에요. 알다, to know란 뜻이에요. 알다. 근데 we don't say 안 알다. 안 알다. We don't say it like this. We say we have a separate word for to know, and this is a negative word. This itself is a negative word, guys. And this means to not know. To not know. To not know. So instead of saying 안 알다, which would sound really, really, really just awkward, just very unnatural, you would say 모르다 for not know. You would say 모르다 for not know. And I don't know this word. Let's try translating. I don't know this word. I don't know this word. Subject, object, and don't know. It would be 저는 이 단어, this vocabulary is 단어. 저는 이 단어를, this is an object of what you don't know, so you can use object marking particle. 저는 이 단어를 I don't know. 몰라요. So 모르다, guys, 모르다 is conjugated 몰라요, 몰랐어요, and 모를 거예요. And some of you who have just finished my conjugation lessons but haven't moved on to irregular verb conjugation lesson might be a little bit confused with the conjugation of this particular verb. But 모르다 is one of the irregular verbs, guys. It's one of the 르다 ending irregular verbs. So I recommend that you guys check irregular verb conjugation lesson, which is essential lesson for beginners. So 모르다's present conjugation is 몰라요. 몰라요. 나는 이 단어를 몰라요. It's not 안 알아요, right? It's not 안 알아요. It's 몰라요. And how about I didn't know? I didn't know. It wouldn't be 안 알았어요. this would sound very, very unnatural, and nobody would understand what you mean, actually. 안 알았어요. It's not clear what you're trying to say because we never really combine 안 with 알다. We say, 몰랐어요. 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 예를 들어서, like, I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. 임신했어요. 임신했어요. If someone says, 저 임신했어요. Or you can say, wow, I didn't know that. 와, 몰랐어요. 축하해요. 축하해요. Congratulations. 몰랐어요. 축하해요. 몰랐어요. So you can use it like that. So 모르다 is a negative verb of 알다. It means to not know. And knowing the negative form is quite important, especially when it comes to using the expressions where you have to use a negative verb, like this one. So before I move on to this, guys, let me mention one more thing. So 싫어하다, guys. 싫어하다 is a verb that means to hate, guys. To hate. But this is not 좋아하다's negative form, grammatically speaking. It could be considered an antonym of 좋아하다 because it's a word with opposite meaning, but grammatically speaking, 싫어하다 is not 좋아하다's negative form. 싫어하다 itself is a positive form, guys. It's a positive form. Sure, it has a meaning of negative meaning. It has negative meaning, but grammatically speaking, it's a positive form because it doesn't mean to not do, right? It just means to hate. To hate. So grammatically, this is a positive form, and 안 싫어하다 would be the negative form. 안 싫어하다 would be the negative form, and there's a reason why I mentioned this, guys. Sorry, this is a typo. It should be I only like. So this ignore this, guys. I should have edited this. Sorry. Edited this. So the reason why I mentioned this is because there are some expressions where you have to use negative verbs, because it only follows the negative verbs for it to make sense. And one of those kinds of expressions, one example of such expression is noun 밖에 plus negative verb, which means only noun. So actually there is one beginner particle. 잠깐만요. I forgot to turn my phone off. It's vibrating. 잠깐만요. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So there is a there's a particle that means only. So if you say noun+, it means only noun. However, if you want to replace this particle to 밖에, it also means only noun, but one condition is that it has to be followed by a negative verb to mean only, a negative verb. So in such cases, you have to write a negative form, grammatically negative form. So if you want to say, I only have 1,001, you can say 1,001 밖에, 1,001, 1,000원 밖에. And then you would have to negate have, which is 있다. And its negation, we learned, is not 안 있다. It should be 없다, right? So if you say 1,000원 밖에 안 있어요, that's just completely off. The sentence is completely off. It should be 밖에 없어요. 1,000원 밖에 없어요. And if you want to say, I only like vegetables. So vegetable is 야채, right? 야채. And if you want to use it with 밖에, you can say 야채 밖에, and you would have to negate like, right? You would have to negate like. And in some cases, I saw some of the learners using 싫어하다 here. 야채 밖에 싫어해요, but this is a wrong sentence, guys, because just like I said, 싫어해요 is not 싫어해요 is not a negative verb, guys. It's a positive verb that means to hate. So this is not a place for a negative verb place. So instead, you can negate 좋아요 simply by using the normal negation form. 안 좋아하다, 안 좋아하다. So 야채밖에 안 좋아해요. 야채밖에 안 좋아해요. 맞아요, 여러분. 밖에가 yes, I saw a question from 코코아님. 밖에 means outside, right? Yeah, 맞아요. It also means outside. So 야채밖에 안 좋아해요. This literally means outside vegetables I don't like anything, which makes sense, right? Which extends to the meaning of I only like vegetables. So anyways, that's why I mentioned 싫어하다 separately so that you don't confuse it with being a negative form, because 싫어 is not a negative form, guys. And yes, so we are done with how to negate all the basics that you need to know for negating Korean verbs and adjectives, guys. Korean verbs and adjectives. And this is the last part, guys. This is the very last part. Which is quite easy, guys. So don't worry. So it's how to negate 이다 verb. It's how to negate 이다 verb. So subject plus noun+이다. So we learned 이다 verb, right? 이다 verb corresponds to be verb in English, but it's slightly different in that it only follows a noun. So if you say subject is a noun, or someone is a noun, like something is a noun, you can use 이다 verb. Guys. So for example, if you say 저는 I, the subject, right? 저는 학생 means a student, and 이에요 is the present conjugation of 이다 verb. 이에요. And we learned that if the noun ends in 받침, we put 이에요. If the noun doesn't end in 받침, we put 예요. Right? So 저는 학생이에요 would mean I am a student. I am a student. And if you want to say I am not a student, oops, I gave you a hint already here. If you want to say I am not a student, you can simply say noun 이가 아니다. 아니다 means to be not. And if you conjugate this, it would be 아니에요. So you can say 저는 학생이 noun이, right? 학생, it ends in 받침, so it should be followed by 이. 학생이 아니에요. 저는 학생이 아니에요. So 학생 means a student. So 저는 학생이 아니에요 would mean I am not a student. And 여자 means a girl. So 저는 여자예요 means I am a girl. And if you want to say I am not a girl, how would you say it? How would you say it, guys? Based on what we just learned, based on using noun 이가 아니다. 저는 여자가 아니에요. 저는 여자가 아니에요. I am not a girl. 저는 남자예요. I am a guy. I am a boy. 남자예요. How about 저는 한국인이에요. I am a 한국인. I am a Korean person. I am Korean. How about I am not Korean? I am not Korean and I am like this country person. How do you say it, guys? 저는 Can you try making your own sentence? I am not Korean, and you can add a new sentence telling us where you're from. 저는 한국인이, 그렇죠. 한국인이. So 아니에요. So be careful with the spelling, guys. It's not 아니에요. It's not spelled this way. Guys. It's not spelled this way. It's spelled this way. 아니다. 아니다. It's not spelled this way, guys, because I just saw one of the comments wrote it this way. This is not the correct way to spell it. The correct way to spell it is 아니에요. 맞아요. 세렌디피티님, it's 아니에요가 맞아요. 아니에요가 아니라요. 세렌디피티님, 맞아요. 아니에요가 아니라요. 아니에요예요. 아니에요예요. 아니에요. I actually looked it up online because this is quite confusing to native speakers as well. But when we are conjugating 아니다, it's conjugated this way. 아니에요, not this way. It might be confusing because we learned that if the noun doesn't have 받침 and ends in vowel, like 아니, it has to be combined with 예요. But this works differently. So this is 아니에요. It's spelled 아니에요, not 아니예요. So 저는 한국인이 아니에요. 저는 한국인이 아니에요. Be careful with the spelling, guys. It's not 아니예요. It's 아니에요. Not that it's gonna, not that it's like a very serious mistake if you write it like this, but this is the correct form, guys. Okay, so 저는 한국인이 아니에요 would mean I'm not Korean. Okay, so guys, that's it for today's lesson, guys. That's it for today's lesson. We learned how to conjugate Korean verbs, adjectives, and ida verbs, and we also learned some of the exception rules that we have to take note of to speak more naturally and correctly. So yes, this is all for this lesson, guys, and I will make sure to provide some review quiz and post it on my website or maybe on the community post or in the comment section of the playback. And I'll also make sure to save all the handwritings that I wrote in this class note and also the raw class note itself. Okay, so thank you guys for joining. Thank you so much for joining. And I am pretty sure I will be having another class soon. I am planning this Sunday, but that is not for beginner levels. That's more for low intermediate level. So I'll announce it separately, guys. I'll announce it separately. So and also there's going to be a part 2 of negation. There are more negation to learn. There are more grammar to learn about Korean negation, including 못하다, 할 수 없다, 하지 못하다, stuff like that. So I'll announce it separately, guys. So thank you so much, and I'll end the stream here. Bye bye. Thank you so much for joining. Bye. Have a great day or have a great evening wherever you guys are. Bye bye.